Picture this. A man in an old gray sweater walks into a diner. No Rolex on his wrist, no flashy car waiting outside. He orders black coffee, pays in cash, and leaves a $2 tip. Nobody gives him a second glance. But what if I told you, that man has more money sitting quietly in his investments than some celebrities flashing on magazine covers? They could have had the sports car, the mansion, the Instagram lifestyle, but they chose the sweater, the coffee, the silence. And here's the crazy part. Most of the wealthiest people you'll never hear about live exactly like this. Because while everyone else is busy showing money, the real millionaires are busy building it. Think about the loudest people you know. The ones flexing vacations, designer shoes, brand new gadgets. They look rich, they sound rich. But if you peeked behind the curtain, you might find maxed out credit cards and savings accounts gasping for air. Meanwhile, someone who looks ordinary, the woman in line at the grocery store with a coupon folder or the guy driving a 10-year-old Honda, might quietly have a 7-figure investment portfolio. It's the ultimate paradox. The people you'd least expect are often the ones who hold the most. And here's what makes it fascinating. They don't talk about it. They don't need to. Their wealth isn't built on applause, it's built on habits. Habits so subtle, so invisible that you'd miss them if you weren't paying attention. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I met a man through a friend. On the surface, he was forgettable. Old sneakers, slightly wrinkled shirt, soft-spoken. At dinner, while others ordered expensive steaks and cocktails, he ordered soup. He listened more than he spoke, but later, when he got up to leave, my friend leaned over and whispered, "He's worth over $30 million. I froze. Nothing about him screamed wealth. No luxury watch, no brand name parade, just calm. And that's when it hit me. The richest people don't broadcast. They move through the world like shadows. You only notice them if you know what to look for. Here's where the curiosity kicks in. Because if you start paying attention, patterns emerge. Small, almost invisible behaviors that separate them from the crowd. It's not just what they do, it's also what they don't do. They don't chase trends. They don't buy to impress. They don't confuse looking wealthy with being wealthy. And that's what this video is about. Not the cliches, not the surface-level advice you've heard 100 times, but the silent habits, the 7 patterns of thought and action that quietly shape millionaires. The ones they never brag about, the ones you could copy starting today. Let's go deeper into the contrast. Think of the average person on payday. The deposit hits their account and within days, sometimes hours, the money's gone. A new gadget here, dinner out there, a treat-yourself purchase that feels harmless in the moment. Now imagine the silent millionaire. The deposit hits and nothing changes. They don't rush to spend. They don't feel the itch to upgrade. They let the money sit, multiply, compound. One mindset says, "I deserve it now." The other whispers, "I'll thank myself later." It's not dramatic, it's not glamorous, it's quiet discipline. And this quiet is what builds the storm of wealth in the background. Here's the part most people get wrong. They think millionaires are born lucky, or that they have some magical business idea nobody else thought of. Sure, that happens sometimes. But for most, it's habits, repeated over years, invisible to the outside world. Tiny choices that compound into empires. Let me give you a glimpse. One of these habits is almost paradoxical. They avoid talking about money. Strange, right? You'd think the wealthy would love to discuss their investments, their wins, their strategies, but silence is their power. While others debate in circles, they're acting quietly in the background. Another is how they treat failure, not as embarrassment, but as tuition. Every loss is a class they paid for, and they never waste the lesson. But here's the thing. I won't just list these habits to you like a checklist, because the real magic isn't in memorizing the 7 points. It's in understanding how they weave into everyday life. How ordinary choices add up to extraordinary outcomes. So let's return to our silent millionaire in the diner. Why black coffee instead of a $6 latte? Why drive a used Honda instead of leasing a shiny new BMW? Why live in the same modest home for decades when they could afford a mansion? Because every one of those decisions carries weight. Not just financial weight, but psychological weight. Each choice whispers, "I'm not here to perform, I'm here to build." That whisper, multiplied by thousands of daily choices, becomes a fortune. And here's what most people miss. It's not about deprivation. It's not about living miserably or denying yourself joy. It's about clarity, knowing what matters, and refusing to waste resources on what doesn't. Let me create some tension here. Imagine 2 lives playing out side by side. In one, a man makes $80,000 a year and spends $75,000. He upgrades every few years, takes vacations he can't quite afford, drives cars that drain his paycheck. He looks successful. His neighbors admire him. But if he stopped working tomorrow, he'd be bankrupt in a year. In the other, a woman makes the same $80,000, but lives on $40,000. She saves, invests, builds assets quietly in the background. No one admires her Honda Civic, nobody claps when she wears the same jacket for 5 winters. But in 10 years, she's a millionaire. Same income, different habits, different destinies, and nobody saw it happening. This is the beauty and the danger of silent habits. They don't feel like much in the moment. Skipping the latte doesn't make you rich. Driving the old car doesn't transform your net worth. Saying no to impulse spending feels invisible. But wealth doesn't shout. It whispers through compound interest, it whispers through investments that grow quietly while you sleep. It whispers through the opportunities you can seize, because you waited, because you prepared, because you built in silence while everyone else was busy being loud. So in this video, I want to take you behind that curtain, to show you the subtle, hidden patterns, the 7 habits that silently shape millionaires, not to romanticize them, not to sell you some rags to riches fairy tale, but to open your eyes to the truth. You don't need a lottery ticket or a lucky break or a 6-figure salary. You need silence. You need patience. You need the habits that nobody brags about, but that quietly build a fortune. Because in the end, wealth isn't the car you drive or the watch on your wrist or the applause of strangers who don't pay your bills. Wealth is freedom. And freedom, my friend, doesn't need to shout. Let's start with the first habit. Habit 1, they stay silent about money. Have you ever noticed that the loudest person in the room is rarely the smartest? The one who can't stop bragging about deals, hustles, or what they're gonna buy next? Contrast that with the silent millionaire. They don't feel the need to flex. They don't measure their worth by how many people notice them. In fact, if you want to find the wealthiest person in a group, don't look for the person talking. Look for the one listening. Here's a story. A man I once knew, let's call him Daniel, lived in a modest brick house with peeling paint. His neighbors assumed he was just another middle-class guy scraping by. He never hosted parties, never showed off, never even mentioned his career. But behind the curtain, Daniel owned 3 apartment buildings, a portfolio of blue-chip stocks, and a small software company that practically printed cash. He was worth tens of millions. One day, a neighbor asked him, half jokingly, "When are you going to upgrade that old car of yours?" Daniel just smiled and said, "It still runs, doesn't it?" He changed the subject. Here's the tension. Most people crave recognition. We want others to know when we succeed, when we buy something new, when we're doing well. But silence is power. The moment you start bragging, you invite judgment. You invite envy. You even invite bad luck. Because now people are watching to see if you stumble. Silent millionaires? They thrive in the shadows. Their money grows precisely because they're not burning energy trying to prove themselves. And here's the paradox. The less they talk about money, the more they seem to have it. But this raises a question. If they're not talking about money, what are they talking about? Relationships, ideas, experiences. The things that actually matter. It's like wealth is the quiet background music in their life. You don't notice it, but it's always there, setting the tone. And once you notice this habit, you start to see it everywhere. The people flashing their lifestyle like neon signs, often drowning in debt. The ones blending in quietly, making simple choices, often sitting on fortunes. Now let me pull you into a little emotional contrast. Imagine 2 co-workers leaving the office on payday. One is talking loudly about their new luxury sneakers, showing off receipts, making sure everyone notices the price tag. Their energy screams, "Look at me, I'm doing well." The other slips out quietly, nothing flashy, maybe even carrying the same bag they've used for years. They don't mention their paycheck, they don't mention their weekend plans. They're invisible. One is performing, the other is building. Guess which one will still be wealthy in 10 years? Silence isn't just about keeping secrets. It's about strategy. When you don't reveal your moves, you can't be judged, copied, or sabotaged. You build in peace, you grow in peace, you make mistakes in peace. Think of it like gardening. If you plant a seed and immediately tell the whole neighborhood, "Hey everyone, look at this amazing tree I'm growing," suddenly everyone's watching. Some might cheer you on, others might secretly hope you fail, and a few might even step on the seed. Silent millionaires don't announce the seed, they water it, they protect it. And one day, there's a tree in their yard so tall, nobody even remembers when it was planted. And here's the psychological kicker. The more you talk about money, the more your brain tricks you into thinking you've already done something with it. Ever notice how someone will say, "I'm gonna start investing soon," and then feel satisfied, without actually investing? Talking becomes a substitute for action. Silent millionaires don't fall into that trap. They act, they adjust, they repeat, without announcing it to the world. That's why their wealth feels invisible until suddenly, it's undeniable. But here's the part that changes everything. Their silence doesn't mean they're joyless. It doesn't mean they're miserly. It doesn't mean they're sitting in a dark room counting coins like Scrooge. Quite the opposite. They enjoy life, but they do it on their terms. They don't need validation, they don't need the applause. Their happiness comes from freedom, not from proving anything. And that's why their silence is so powerful. It's not just about money, it's about peace. Now let me leave you with a cliffhanger. Because silence is only the shield. It protects their habits from being exposed, from being diluted by outside pressure. But protection alone doesn't build a fortune. What really transforms their wealth is what they do with the money they don't talk about. And this next habit, it's so counterintuitive, so against the grain that it makes most people uncomfortable the first time they hear it. But once you understand it, you'll never see money the same way again. So here we are, 7 habits, 7 quiet patterns that shape the lives of the silent millionaires. Not flashy, not loud, not designed for applause, just simple repeated actions that add up over years. Do you remember where we began? That diner, that man in the old gray sweater? The one who ordered black coffee, paid in cash, and walked out unnoticed. Nobody clapped, nobody cared, and yet he was freer than most of the people speeding down the highway in cars they couldn't afford, chasing recognition they'd never catch. Because wealth, real wealth, doesn't shout. It whispers. It whispers in the discipline to say no when it's easier to say yes. It whispers in the patience to let compound interest do its slow, invisible magic. It whispers in the freedom to walk away from anything, because you no longer need to perform for anyone. And here's the lesson that lingers. Becoming wealthy isn't about one giant leap. It's about the tiniest, quietest steps, repeated. It's not skipping every coffee. It's learning to see money as a tool. It's not hustling until you collapse. It's building habits so steady they carry you forward even when you're tired. The power is not in what's dramatic. The power is in what's consistent. So maybe the question isn't, how do I get rich? Maybe the real question is, what whispers am I choosing to listen to? The whisper of instant gratification, or the whisper of patience? The whisper of performance, or the whisper of freedom? Choose carefully, because those whispers become habits, and those habits become your life. And if this spoke to you, if you felt even one of those whispers tugging at you, then stay with me. This channel is about building that quiet, resilient kind of wealth together. Subscribe, follow along, share this with someone who needs it. Not because it helps me, but because it keeps you surrounded by voices reminding you to build instead of perform. Because one day, years from now, I hope someone looks at you, the way I looked at that man in the diner, and whispers, "You'd never know it, but they're free." Wealth doesn't shout, it whispers. And those who listen are free.